Fasilena kilaboko komrayo Murabaraba Hauyegele Murabaraba Hauyegele Murabaraba Hauyegele Kirili Hutalena kilamali mamulayo Murabaraba Hauyegele Murabaraba Hauyegele.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, the people of South Africa, Africa, and the world. And thanks very much for tuning into this week's installment of the EFF podcast. My name is Titus Tungutkozanamsengonatoleka, and we're coming to you from Winnie Madikizela Mandela House here in Johannesburg, South Africa. Now I'm taking you to the United States of America, where I meet my guest, my brother, Jackson Hinkle. He's an American political commentator. Jackson, thank you very much for coming through and welcome to the EFF podcast.
Thank you for having me, Titus. It is a great honor to be here, and I love everything you guys are doing.
Yeah. So, Pat, I just want us to begin here before we get into the nuts and bolts of Trump's administration. I just want us to take a few seconds and observe a moment of silence for the 14 SANDF soldiers who were killed in the Eastern DRC, whose mortal remains have now been brought back in South Africa. They have now touched the home soil. Right. So Donald Trump has made a political comeback, notwithstanding the assassination attempts, the criminal convictions, and including the change in political opponent. But none of this stood in his way of becoming the president. I mean, if you can just give us the lay of the land when you look at the presidency of Donald Trump dating back to 2016, 2020, he got beaten by Joe Biden. And fast forward 2024, he came back and he won the U.S. election, becoming the 47th president of the U.S. Just perhaps some of the factors that led to him coming back, what paved his way back into office?
Of course, I'll say that Trump in his first term was surrounded by, as we all know, a bunch of deep state, pro-war globalists like John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and many others. And it was a very, very, very sad sight to see for a candidate, Trump, who had campaigned as being an alternative to the political establishment. Fast forward, he loses the election in 2020. There's, of course, a lot of concerns about the validity of those results. They seem awfully weird to me. But putting that aside, we now move into what was the 2024 election cycle, where Trump said that he was going to be our retribution, our vengeance against the deep state who has wronged America and who has wronged him and his family and his political movement. And really in this campaign that Trump led, we saw a lot of interesting promises about his plans to fight the deep state. But I don't think anyone could have guessed that what we were going to see is what actually has manifested over the past, 3.5 weeks, which has been a total, complete, and utter war on the deep state, on USAID, on the National Endowment for Democracy, and on, the legacy of the Biden administration's proxy war in Ukraine. And, well, even, what's been happening in Gaza under the Biden administration. There's a lot of questions as to whether or not the ceasefire will hold over the weekend. And obviously, Trump is a great friend of the Zionists. But you can't leave out the fact that Trump was the one who got the ceasefire deal done in the first place. And by the grace of God, this ceasefire will hold and there will be peace, and hopefully we can move forward. There's one thing I will say. In Gaza today, Israel finally bent the knee and got in the approved amount of humanitarian aid shipments that they had agreed to in the initial ceasefire. So hopefully, maybe we'll see, the ceasefire hold. And I got to say, Donald Trump is, with the exception of his his allegiance to
Yeah.
Israel, he's really proving himself to be a formidable force in U.S. politics, the likes of which we haven't seen in many, many years.
And perhaps if I can just take you back to last year, just in the build up to the elections, there was an assassination attempt. Was that really staged, or it was a true reflection of what happened?
No, I think it was real. I think it was real. I think there was one assassination attempt, of course, where the bullet nicked Trump's ear. There was another one where a man by the name of Ryan Ruth, who was in Ukraine doing U.S. government contracting services, was trying to get U.S. veterans who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan to go fight in Ukraine, and then he tried to shoot Donald Trump, and he was about 4 minutes away from actually fulfilling that goal. And there's probably many more assassination attempts that we've never even heard of, because some of these things, they keep private.
Yeah.
But I do think it was all real. I do think that what we're seeing now with Trump going after these institutions of the globalist establishment, I do think that, there are many people who are very upset by this, and these people have a lot of power, and they, are the sorts of people who have a history and a record that precedes them of targeting, eliminating, or censoring dissident political voices who pose that same threat to the establishment.
Yeah. And now Trump's administration has made headlines, across different nations. What is your interpretation of Trump's administration since he assumed office? Key among other decisions include the halting of foreign aid to South Africa.
Well, you're South African, so you can probably tell me what you think about that. I'd love to hear. But as an American who has seen U.S. aid and U.S. NGOs, not non-governmental organizations, weaponize U.S. taxpayer dollars to foment destabilization in countries all across the world who are fighting for their sovereignty, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, so on and so forth. I think that Trump cutting off U.S. aid is a brilliant thing. And, there's a lot of people who are pointing out that, Trump is cutting off the aid to South Africa because South Africa is friends with Russia, and they're friends with BRICS and China, and they're one of the founding members of BRICS. And you have these figures like Julius Malema, the commander-in-chief of the EFF, who are fighting for sovereignty. And this really upsets Elon Musk, and it really upsets Donald Trump. But I would have to say that I think the halting, the cutting of U.S. aid to South Africa, it's going to do a few things, and they're all good for South Africa. It means you're not going to have U.S.-funded media that is telling a bunch of lies about Julius Malema. It means that you're going to have a lot of these foreign agents, really is what they are, who are acting as political, sovereign, independent political voices in South Africa. They're going to lose their funding, and they're going to have no ability to continue their operations because they don't have the popular support of the South African people. They're just funded by the U.S.
Yeah.
And also, I think these attacks on Mr. Malema, Commander-in-Chief Malema, are going to turn him into a martyr of sorts. And it's going to drive a great deal of popular support behind him, because obviously Elon Musk is the villain in this story, and he's chosen to make Mr. Malema his persona non grata, enemy number one. So I think it is very good for South Africa.
Absolutely.
In the fight for South Africa's freedom.
Absolutely. And talking about Elon Musk, he has taken a stance. In fact, he wants the commander-in-chief, the president of the EFF, Julius Malema, to be labeled an international criminal. What do you make of that? I've seen you have taken to X to post the president, Malema, as your hero amid all these attacks from the U.S.
Yeah, well, I see what Elon Musk is saying, and I think it's really crazy because, Elon Musk right now, he's going around and he's parading himself around with Benjamin Netanyahu, a guy who's
Yeah.
responsible for at least 40,000 Gazan deaths, several thousand Lebanese deaths, and maybe hundreds of thousands of Gazan deaths. We don't know the true stats. And he's providing Starlink, of course, to Israel. He's providing Starlink to this Ukraine proxy war still. He's got blood on his hands. He's got Russian blood on his hands. He's got Gazan blood on his hands. So this guy, the fact that he has the audacity to say that Commander-in-Chief Malema, who has stood steadfast with the Palestinian resistance and called for even arming South Africa to arm the Palestinian resistance, is really incredible. It is extremely hypocritical. And what it comes down to is it's not about Julius Malema being a criminal. He's not. What Julius Malema is guilty of, he is guilty of something. Julius Malema is guilty of trying to destroy the apartheid economic system that still presides over South Africa today, because apartheid may have politically ended, but the economic system still remains. And that is what Julius Malema is fighting against. He's fighting against the big banks. He's fighting against Zionist interests. He's fighting against the monopolies that are controlled by Western institutions that are enslaving the South African people. And that is what really gets under Elon Musk's skin.
Yeah.
That is the only crime he is guilty of committing. And for that, I consider him a hero.
Yeah. And some people may think that you are an American. You may be privileged. What makes you resonate with the ideas and the ideology of the EFF and believe in the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, being an American?
Well, the answer is quite simple. A lot of people say that the biggest enemy of America is Russia, or they'll say America's biggest enemy is China now. Now Elon Musk is saying our enemy is Julius Malema. It's crazy. But the truth is, the biggest enemy of the U.S. government are the American people. We are being, the boot is on our neck 24/7 in the United States. And our government has everything that our government does to liberation movements in Gaza, everything it does to liberation movements in South Africa, or the SMO, people fighting in the SMO in Russia. This is what the U.S. government does to freedom fighters in America. Look no further than MLK. Look no further than Malcolm X. It's the U.S. government has a very long track record of, at the least censoring or trying to demonetize, strip freedom fighters of their income and their ability to speak freely. They try to imprison us, and they try to get us banned everywhere. And if that doesn't work, then they do what they always do. They assassinate freedom fighters and truth tellers. So I say that, of course, you look at the economic well-being of an average American versus an average South African. I mean, I'm not just going to discredit the disparities there, but obviously we shared a common struggle. And that struggle between the working class in South Africa and the working class in America is to defeat this unipolar globalist empire.
So, in a nutshell, you are a Marxist-Leninist in approach.
100%. I'm a communist. I'm a Stalinist. I'm a Marxist-Leninist.
Yeah.
And, that's another reason why I have great respect for Julius Malema.
Now let's look at the role of Doge. It's a department that has been established quite recently, and Elon Musk is in the forefront, and it has already kicked off its work cutting a budget in the U.S. government. The Pentagon is on the cards as well. The Voice of America is not spared. What are some of the major spending cuts that the Doge has implemented so far, and what role does Elon Musk really play in Doge?
I understand. I just said Elon Musk and his comments towards South Africa, but that should not take away from the great work that he's doing with Doge. And like I mentioned, the great work he's doing with Doge and his influence on Trump to cut off aid to South Africa, he thinks that's some sort of an attack on South Africa, but I think that's a good thing. Actually. But anyways, with Doge, it's his level of influence is reportedly very, very deep. It's very intricate how he's involved in all this. I mean, I'm seeing reports that he's sleeping in government buildings 24/7. He's working, sleeping in these government buildings, trying to get to the bottom about what's going on. He's got a brilliant team of 100 young Americans that are getting to the bottom of all this endless spending. And essentially, they're taking government employee by government employee, and they're saying, we'll give you 15 minutes to justify your job to us. And if you can't do that, you're out. You're no longer employed. And as you can imagine, a lot of these people that spend their time pushing insane politics, degenerate politics, anti-human politics, politics that align with the interests of finance capital and Wall Street all across the world. These people don't have jobs that actually serve the American people. Their jobs are actually undercutting our ability to have good relations and win-win cooperation with nations all across the world that we should have, decent, friendship with. So I think Elon Musk is doing a great job. As for savings, Doge is expected to release a report next week about some of the biggest, savings that they achieved, and there's going to be a line-by-line item reports that's put forward. But as you mentioned, the biggest items that have been, saved that the U.S. taxpayer no longer has to account for are the USAID, U.S. aid program. The National Endowment for Democracy has reportedly lost its funding as of this week. Voice of America, Radio Liberty, which used to be called Radio Liberty from Bolshevism. It was anti-communist media outfits that was completely controlled by the CIA and probably still was up until this week. All these things and more. I am just so happy to see it, and they're really just going headfirst, diving in and cutting away at the deep state wherever it presents itself.
And you look at what Trump has done, guided, of course, by misinformation. They believe that in South Africa, there's land grab, there's confiscation of land, which is a fallacy. Now, they have provided a humanitarian relief to the Afrikaner community in South Africa. And I just wonder if perhaps in the streets of the US, you have seen the likes of AfriForum, Kerry Kriel, and Helen Zille in the streets of US already.
No, I haven't seen them. I don't think they're too popular amongst the American people either. But what I will say is that Elon Musk is in for a rude awakening if he thinks that expropriation of land is the worst thing that he's going to see out of South Africa or Africa as a whole. Like, personally, I hope to see a future where we have Africa in a place where China is today. If you told anyone 100, 200 years ago that China would be the most powerful economy in the world, people would look at you and laugh. They'd think you're crazy. China, a powerful economy? And that's what I think, you, myself, and so many others understand about Africa today, is that this is the richest economy on the face of the earth, on paper, that is, when you look at the assets in Africa. Of course, there's been a concerted effort to stop Africa from actually developing. My concern is that a lot of people in the West think that the raw minerals, the resources in Africa are not actually African resources. They think they are the resources of France or the Dutch or the US or whoever else it is that is trying to steal these resources, the British maybe. But I envision and I hope and I pray for a future where we have an Africa that's truly sovereign, an Africa for Africans, and we have an Africa that is willing to and able to stand on its own 2 feet, that will fight for its land, an Africa that isn't controlled by 5% of the population, such as what we're seeing in Africa and South Africa right now.
Yeah.
And lastly, an Africa that is willing to defend itself, hopefully with nuclear weapons.
I just wonder now, what would be the rippling effects, or rather the impact of Trump's decision on U.S. foreign investment? I understand he has already hiked some tariffs on imports from overseas. Countries like Canada, Mexico, and China have been affected. I've seen the European Commission as well has lambasted. Canada as well has come through to say these tariffs are unjustifiable. Your take?
Well, I don't shed any tears over, Canada having their economy hurt or anything like that. But I do think that it is going to have a negative impact on the American working class. We're going to have to pay a higher price for basic goods. If Trump was leading a massive revolution of industrialization and technological advancement, and jobs growth in the United States while doing these tariffs, that would be one thing. That would be a rather brilliant policy. If Donald Trump was doing the tariffs and also, doing something like debt forgiveness, a debt jubilee, that would be one thing. But without any sort of relief of pressure for the American working class, while increasing the price of basic goods via tariffs, I don't think it's a good strategy. And lastly, I'll say I don't think it's a good strategy if you are threatening, 70% of the world that you're going to tariff them. Obviously, Trump has only applied sanctions on a few countries, tariffs on a few countries.
Yeah.
Those being, Canada, Mexico, as you mentioned, some other countries, but and China. But I think this is going to bite Trump in the butt. We're living in a multipolar world now. And look at what China did. China's got a far larger economy, GDP, purchasing power parity. And China said, okay, well, if you want to tariff us, we're going to tariff you guys. We're going to tariff all U.S. Automobiles that you try to sell in China. So Elon Musk took a big hit there.
Yeah.
Overall, I don't think it's a good policy.
Yeah. And looking at some of these policies, right, I wonder what is the sentiment around the U.S. Congress. I've had George Soros lambasting Trump, saying he's a con man and an ultimate narcissist. I wonder what is the general sentiment around Trump's policies since he came in office. Is the U.S. Congress divided, or they are in solidarity?
Well, the U.S. Congress is staunchly opposed to Trump's attacks on the deep state. For example, the appointment of Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, the highest intelligence official in the United States, is something that was very, very polarizing in the U.S. Congress. And the only reason why Republicans voted to confirm her in this position is because she had the full backing of Trump, and it was a very important selection for Trump, for her in that position. You see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as health secretary. He's facing a lot of issues right now, trying to get confirmed. And there's a lot of Republicans who are concerned about his position because, well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is opposed to the big pharma monopolies and what they do to the American people. So I think Congress is primarily concerned with the idea that in a Trump administration 2.0, that Trump is going to bring more power to the executive branch, and he's going to take that power from Congress, from NGOs, and from U.S. government agencies that are going to be cut down to barely anything, like the Department of Education. Department of Defense is going to have a full audit. The IRS is going to have an audit. The USAID has already had an audit. And I think that Congress is worried about this because when they lose power, they lose influence. And even though that might be a good thing for the country, 17% of Americans feel as though their congressperson actually represents their views and is doing a good job. Yeah. It's a good thing that Congress is losing power, but they are going to fight a war to keep it. And Donald Trump is in for a very big battle.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at Trump, to me, he's driven by blatant hypocrisy, because he's so against South Africa's policies. For example, the expropriation act, right, which is not in fact effective as the EFF would want. In fact, it's just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, a drop in the ocean, because the Expropriation Act in South Africa, as it stands, it does not address the historical injustices, right? But you look at what Trump seeks to do in Israel. Him and Benjamin Netanyahu want to take the land of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. What is your take on Trump's action on South Africa and Israel? Was he not supposed to perhaps apply the same energy in Israel, because in Israel there is genocide of Palestinians?
Extremely hypocritical. And you don't even have to look at Gaza. Look at what Donald Trump is saying about Canada, about Greenland, about the Panama Canal. He's saying that we are either going to take these territories or infrastructure projects or countries, or maybe he'll buy them, and then they will be United States territory. They'll be the 51st states, if you will. Well, that is that's a fair and honest thing to do, unless, of course, you are threatening to sanction, list people as international criminals, and cut all aid to a country because they themselves are offering to purchase land and negotiate purchases of land from, the richest of the rich, and try to divvy that land up and and to give it to the people, the working class people of South Africa, who have been under the boot of this land owning class for so long. So it's extremely hypocritical. And then as for Gaza, it's even worse. He said he's just going to take Gaza and forcibly remove 1.7 to 1.9 million people. Never going to happen. I don't see any way that's going to happen. But as crazy as it is that he said that, I will say it did freak out a lot of Arab leaders. And now you have Egypt and Saudi Arabia, which were so offended and so worried about Trump's plan to take over Gaza, that they themselves, for the first time ever, are now saying that they are going to put together a plan with funding to rebuild Gaza for the Palestinians, and the Palestinians will not be leaving. So whatever Trump's motives were there, it actually got Egypt and Saudi Arabia to get their stuff together and begin to find a solution to this horrible, horrific crisis of our generation in Gaza.
Yeah. And the goal of the U.S. aid, some believe, is to take money from poor people who are in rich countries to rich people who are in poor countries. Can you just unpack that analogy?
It's true. That's a quote from Dr. Ron Paul, who's a very famous congressman in the United States. And, he ran for president. He had a very big campaign. And what Dr. Ron Paul is saying there is he's basically saying that the U.S. government is taking the taxpayer dollars. I mean, think about Americans right now. Most working class Americans are struggling to get by. They have home loan debt. They got student loan debt. They got medical debt. They got car loan debt. They got all these sorts of debts, credit card debt. They can barely live. People aren't having big families because they can't afford it. And we got record numbers of homelessness. We got 600,000 homeless Americans. And what is the U.S. government doing? Is it trying to address any of these issues? No. It's taking more money from the working class and then sending it to the political elites, the ruling elite, the media elite, and countries all across the world to try and destabilize democratically elected governments or to keep the U.S. allied puppet governments in charge. And I think Dr. Ron Paul's quote is right on the money, and I'd go one step further. It's not just about taking money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor countries. It's about buying rich people in poor countries and buying their political views and buying their souls and their lives so as to make sure that they will put their lives on the line to protect U.S. interests and hegemony all across the world.
Yeah. And some of the struggles that we face here in South Africa include inequality. The levels of inequalities are scary in this country. In fact, South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. And what the EFF seeks to address is the historical injustices, is to attain economic power, because the economy in this country really lies in the hands of the minority, while the majority languish in poverty. We have the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, who has been preaching economic freedom in our lifetime. You might have seen what the EFF has done in this country to sort of liberate, conscientize the black minds. What stood out from some of the struggles that the EFF is waging in South Africa?
Well, of course, expropriation without compensation was a big one for me. You can look at what China did after their revolution. What did they do? The Soviets, they said, okay, we're going to kill off the Tsar's family after the revolution. The Tsar, Nicholas II, he did so much. He brought a lot of pain to a lot of people. Some people love him, but he brought a lot of pain to a lot of people, and they killed his family, which I don't think needed to be done. China took a very, very good approach. What they did with their corrupt ruler that they overthrew was they said, okay, you get to live, but for the rest of your life, you're going to be picking trash off the streets of our major cities, and you're going to be rebuilding our country after all the damage you did. And in South Africa, I really see it no different. Politics is an extension of war. And you're not going to win in a war if you just try to act nice with the people who have all of the tanks, all of the guns, all of the munitions. And Commander-in-Chief Julius Malema understands that you got to fight for it. This isn't about being nice and negotiating and playing patty cake and saying, please, sir, can we have our land back? No, you got to fight for it. And he understands that tenacity. He has that dog in him. He has that fight in him and that fire. And I see it in the stadiums of people, And also, of course, Commander-in-Chief Malema, he says Putin is on our side. Russia, we stand with Russia in their special military operation. For President Malema, it's not just about South Africa. This is about a global revolution of anti-imperialist forces, and that is exactly what we need. That is the type of the leader that the world needs right now.
Yeah.
And I fully support him in his endeavors.
Yeah. Jackson, thank you very much for coming through to the EFF podcast. We hope to catch up with you when you come here in South Africa very soon.
Thank you, Titus, and I'm going to have you on my show very soon. So I look forward to that conversation as well.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
A big shout out to Jackson Hinkle, all the way from America, the United States of America. My name is Titus Tsungo. Until we meet again, fight to the end.
Kirili fasilena kilabo kokomrayo rabaraba hauyegele murabaraba hauyegele rabaraba hauyegele kirili utlalena kilamali mamulayo rabaraba hauyegele murabaraba hauye